The twin sons of avarice burned like molten eyes in the void, their light spilling across the grand assembly of the Galactic Council's fleets. Ships from 100 civilizations floated in perfect ceremonial formation, their hulls polished to brilliance, their weapons gleaming as if to blind the stars themselves. It was not merely a military gathering, it was theater, spectacle, a declaration of supremacy. The Zirathai crystal ships were the first to arrive, catching the sun's glare until they shimmered like blades of fractured glass. Their destroyers stretched sleek and sharp, their crystalline armor refracting beams of light into a kaleidoscope of colors, beauty married to lethality. Then came the Krell, their living bioships gliding forward like beasts from the abyss. Tendrils curled and flexed as though tasting the void, and pulsing sacs of energy throbbed across their hulls. Every vessel was alive, breathing, a predator eager for prey. Even the Jaran made their presence felt. Their hyperfusion cruisers, black as obsidian, traced with rivers of molten red, exuded silent menace. They did not boast. They did not need to. Their very presence was intimidation carved into steel. One by one, the galaxy's great powers unveiled their pride. Cannons extended. Wings unfolded. Weapons hummed with restrained fury. Avarice itself seemed to hold its breath. The spectators, ambassadors, generals, merchants, even rival spies, watched from orbiting platforms, their voices a rising tide of awe and fear. This was the essence of power. This was the Council's message to the galaxy: here are the species who shaped the stars. And then, the humans arrived. A ripple passed through the void as the wormhole spat out 8 hulking silhouettes. At first glance, they seemed wrong. Their lines were blunt, inelegant. Their engines belched irregular flares. Their hulls bore the scars of battles fought long before half the races present had achieved faster than light travel. Paint flaked from gray plating. Armor was patched with mismatched panels. Some sections looked rusted, as if time itself had corroded them. The USS Saratoga led the formation, her once proud name barely visible against her weathered skin. The galaxy had expected something sleek, something dazzling, perhaps a hidden jewel of human ingenuity. What emerged instead were relics. Laughter spread across calm channels, rippling like cruel waves. "Are those mining rigs?" sneered a Zirathai commander, his crystalline face fractured into amusement. "They reek of decay," hissed a Krell ambassador. "Do they think to insult us with this display?" "Humans," one Jaran captain muttered coldly, "were always more noise than substance." On the bridge of the Saratoga, Admiral Marcus Kane stood in silence. His uniform was simple, devoid of flourish. His presence, however, filled the room. He clasped his hands behind his back, eyes locked on the viewing screen as if the laughter did not exist. At his side, Captain Sarah Whitaker leaned forward, jaw tight, her voice a low murmur. "They don't understand, sir." "They don't need to," Kane replied, calm as stone. "Not until the curtain rises." The Council's agenda rolled forward, oblivious to mockery. Each species was to demonstrate its strength against a fleet of drones, artificial enemies designed to mimic an invasion force. A tradition, yes, but also a challenge, proof of worth, a chance to boast in fire and metal. One by one, fleets dazzled the crowd. The Zirathai unleashed beams that split the void into shards of light, their drones crumbling with surgical precision. The Krell swarmed their foes, tendrils lashing and plasma bile hissing, devouring targets whole. The Jaran turned the battlefield into a furnace, their hyperfusion weapons collapsing drones in nuclear blossoms. Each performance earned applause, cheers, and murmurs of awe. Then came the humans' turn. Their relics drifted forward, lumbering into position. They did not gleam. They did not sing with energy. They looked tired, as though they had already fought their wars and had nothing left to prove. The spectators scoffed. Admiral Kane gave a single nod. "Bring them online." The Saratoga rumbled, as though waking from a long sleep. Across the fleet, turrets groaned as they rotated into position, hydraulics wheezing. Hatches creaked open, revealing missile silos that looked more like industrial storage tubes than modern launchers. Power conduits flickered. Systems whined. For a moment, nothing happened. The void was silent but for the whisper of alien laughter. Then the humans fired. The darkness exploded in fire. Railguns thundered, their slugs screaming through the void at velocities that shattered physics itself. Missiles streaked outward in dense swarms, each one trailing a fiery comet tail. Kinetic cannons roared, spitting solid tungsten rounds that hit with the force of mountains. The drones never stood a chance. The first wave disintegrated in a hail of shrapnel, torn apart before their sensors registered the assault. The second wave tried to scatter, only to be shredded by storms of guided rockets that chased them like rabid wolves. Every impact was thunder, every detonation a sun blooming briefly in the void. It wasn't just destruction. It was slaughter. Unlike the elegance of Council fleets, humanity's weapons fought dirty. Their missiles did not vaporize targets, they gutted them, leaving jagged wreckage spinning through the void. Their railguns did not stun, they pierced clean through, sending drones tumbling lifeless. There was no grace, no artistry, only brutality. And through it all, the human ships did not dance or dodge. They stayed rooted, immovable, like mountains of steel. They absorbed stray fire without care, their scarred hulls shrugging off impacts. They advanced with grim inevitability, tearing the enemy apart piece by piece. Within minutes, the battlefield was silent again. The drones were gone. Not disabled. Not scattered. Gone. Reduced to ash, fragments, and molten slag drifting like a funeral shroud across Avarice. The humans had not lost a single ship. On the observation platforms, silence reigned. The laughter was gone. The smug smiles had died. The galaxy stared in mute disbelief at the carnage. On the Saratoga's bridge, Captain Whitaker let out a slow breath, eyes locked on the devastation. "They'll never laugh at us again," she whispered. Admiral Kane's gaze did not waver. His voice was calm, almost mournful. "Obsolete," he said softly. And still enough. The galaxy had come expecting a joke. What they had witnessed was a reminder. Humanity's relics were not relics at all. They were warnings. And the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, remembered what fear felt like. The council chamber of Avarice was a cathedral of light and steel. Towering columns of alloy reached toward a domed ceiling that shimmered with holographic constellations, each star marking a member of the council. Delegates of countless species filled the seats, their voices a storm of outrage and disbelief. The air trembled with their cries. They are centuries behind. Their weapons are crude, barbaric. Those were relics, scrap. How could they annihilate a drone fleet so completely? No efficiency, no precision, only wasteful carnage. Every word carried equal parts fear and denial. The performance they had just witnessed had shaken the chamber to its foundation. The humans, long dismissed as faded relics themselves, had turned the galaxy's laughter into a choking silence. And still, Admiral Marcus Kane stood calm at the heart of the storm. He did not speak. He let the chaos swell around him, his silence more commanding than the shrieks of ambassadors. At his side, Captain Sarah Whitaker leaned forward in her seat, her jaw clenched tight. "They don't believe it," she murmured. "Even after watching it with their own eyes." "They believe," Kane answered, his voice as steady as the void. "They simply don't want to admit it." The din reached its peak when Chancellor Vera herself rose from the high dais. Her serpentine form, scaled and glittering, towered over the assembly. Her forked tongue flickered with disdain as her voice cut through the uproar like a blade. "Admiral Kane," she hissed, her slitted eyes narrowing. "What is the meaning of this display? These ships you bring are obsolete. By your own admission, they are relics of a forgotten age. Are you mocking this council with such crude theatrics?" A hush fell. All eyes turned to the human admiral. Kane rose, the motion slow, deliberate. The light from the dome caught his weathered face, the hard lines carved by years of command. He stood as though he carried the weight of every battle humanity had fought and every life lost along the way. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying to the farthest corners of the chamber. "These ships are history. Scrap metal, by your standards. We brought them because you demanded a demonstration of power. And we thought it fitting to remind this galaxy of something it has forgotten. Forgotten? Vera sneered. Enlighten us, human. Kane's eyes swept the room, unflinching before the stares of 100 species. His words fell heavy as stone. That war is not elegance. It is not spectacle. It is not theater for your admirals and ministers to applaud. War is survival. And survival, he paused, letting the silence deepen, is something humanity learned in blood long before your kind looked to the stars. A ripple of unease coursed through the chamber. Some shifted in their seats. Others whispered. But more than a few sat rigid, silent, caught by the weight in his tone. Captain Whitaker glanced sideways at Kane, her eyes sharp. She could feel the unease spreading like cracks in glass. They still think we're bluffing, she whispered. They will learn otherwise, Kane replied. The Council, perhaps desperate to reassert its authority, proposed a second test. Not against mindless drones this time, but against a living fleet. Controlled, limited combat, sanctioned and observed. It was meant to put humans back in their place. The Krell volunteered without hesitation. Their bioships writhed eagerly in the void, tendrils quivering with anticipation. To them, humanity's brutal relics were prey waiting to be devoured. And so the stage was set. Beneath the twin suns, in the wide-open void of avarice, the Krell armada formed up. Dozens of living warships pulsed with sickly light, their organic cores glowing in hunger. Across from them, the 8 human relics drifted silently, their hulls scarred and unadorned. The galaxy watched. The Krell struck first. Their ships lashed forward, vomiting streams of corrosive plasma that burned trails of green fire through the void. Tendrils snapped outward, writhing like serpents, seeking to ensnare human hulls and tear them apart piece by piece. The USS Saratoga shuddered under the first volley, her plating glowing red where plasma splashed across her armor. Sparks cascaded inside the bridge as conduits overloaded. Forward plating at 60%, a technician shouted. Whitaker gripped the railing. They're trying to drown us in fire. Kane didn't flinch. His voice cut across the chaos. Return it. All batteries, return it. The human fleet roared. Missiles erupted from their silos in staggering waves, thousands of them, each burning like a falling star. Railguns cracked and boomed, their slugs tearing into Krell hulls with thunderous impacts. Kinetic rounds, crude and simple, ripped through living flesh as though it were paper. The first Krell ship burst apart, its pulsing core exploding in a shriek of organic fire. The second tried to lash the Saratoga with tendrils, but the human ship rammed forward, her steel prow cutting through flesh and bone like an executioner's blade. The Krell vessel screamed across every channel, its dying wails haunting the void as its body split apart. The galaxy had never seen warfare like this. Where other fleets danced and maneuvered with precision, the humans fought like cornered beasts. They closed distance recklessly, firing point-blank railgun volleys that punched holes through Krell hearts. They launched missiles in suicidal proximity, uncaring of the shockwaves battering their own hulls. They rammed, they ripped, they destroyed with savage efficiency. The Krell armada howled, their organic ships bleeding energy, writhing in desperation. But one by one, they fell. Explosions flared like miniature suns. Severed tendrils floated in the void like corpses adrift at sea. Within an hour, half the Krell fleet was gone. By the second, nearly all were silent wreckage, drifting lifeless among clouds of their own burnt tissue. Only a handful limped away, retreating in shame. And the human relics still stood. Scarred, scorched, but unbroken. The Council's viewing platforms were silent, the delegates frozen in disbelief. This is impossible, one Zirathai whispered. They fight like animals, a Jaran admiral muttered. Yet even he looked unsettled, as if glimpsing a predator he had thought extinct. On the Saratoga, Sarah Whitaker leaned heavily on the railing, sweat glistening on her brow. Her voice shook with awe and fear. We just broke them. A Council fleet. With relics. Kane stood tall, his silhouette etched against the dying light of battle. His voice, carried across the void to every listening channel, was iron. You asked us to bring our obsolete fleet. We did. Imagine, then, what we keep hidden. The words struck the chamber like thunder. No laughter followed. No mockery dared to rise. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy looked at humanity and felt fear. Word spread faster than any courier, faster than sanction channels could contain. What began as whispers aboard the Avarice stations became storms across the stars. The humans annihilated a Krell fleet. Their obsolete ships destroyed dozens, perhaps hundreds, without loss. If this is their past, what future horrors do they keep hidden? By the third day, entire sectors buzzed with fear. Merchants refused to pass near human space. Admirals recalled fleets from exploratory borders. Even the proud Jaran, who had mocked the relics most cruelly, began reinforcing their defenses in secret. The laughter that had once echoed through the void was gone. In its place lingered unease, cold, gnawing, inescapable. And still, the humans said nothing. They did not gloat. They did not boast. Their ships simply turned, scarred and silent, and returned to their place in the Council fleet as though nothing had happened. It was that silence which terrified the galaxy most of all. The Council convened an emergency session within the Great Chamber of Avarice. The air was thick with fear, the voices of delegates sharp and frantic. They must be hiding fleets 100 times larger, cried the Zirathai minister, her crystal form quivering. No civilization keeps such power concealed unless preparing for conquest, hissed a Krell warlord. This is a threat to every world. They must be forced to reveal their true strength, shouted a Jaran general, his molten eyes burning with both rage and fear. But amidst the uproar, no one spoke with certainty. No one dared say aloud what many suspected, that if these relics were so deadly, humanity's current fleet must be something the galaxy was not prepared to even imagine. When the doors to the chamber opened and the human delegation entered, silence fell like a shroud. Admiral Marcus Kane walked at the head, his expression unreadable. Captain Sarah Whitaker followed close behind, her boots echoing against the polished floor. The 8 officers who had commanded the relic fleet trailed them, bearing no weapons, no armor, only the presence of men and women who had stood in fire and not burned. The counselors stared, dozens of species watching every step. Fear sharpened their gazes, but pride and defiance fought to mask it. Kane stopped at the center of the chamber. He did not bow. He did not lower his head. He simply stood, as though the weight of their stares was less than the weight of memory he carried. Chancellor Vera rose once more, her voice brittle but commanding. Admiral Kane. Humanity has shaken this council with your display. We demand to know the truth. Why bring such barbaric ships? Why keep them, why maintain them, if not for conquest? Speak plainly, for your silence will be taken as threat. The demand hung heavy. Kane's reply came like the strike of a hammer. You wanted a show of power. You forced us into this theater of arrogance. And now you tremble because you've seen it. Vera's tongue flicked in anger. You dare. I dare nothing, Kane cut her off, his voice steel. You asked us to bring our obsolete fleet. We did. You mocked them, spat at them, laughed in our faces. And then you watched as those relics slaughtered a living armada. The chamber rippled with unease. Some tried to protest, others sat rigid, unwilling to meet Kane's gaze. Do you want to know why we keep them? Kane continued, his voice lower now, but sharper still. Because they are reminders. Relics not only of steel, but of history. Of the wars that nearly broke us, of the cost we paid to survive. Whitaker stepped forward, her voice firm. Every scar on those ships is a grave marker. Every railgun slug, every missile warhead, is a lesson we bought with blood. They are obsolete, yes, but they remind us never to forget what survival truly means. A silence followed, deeper than before. The chamber seemed to shrink around Kane as his final words fell. We did not build those ships for conquest. We kept them to remember. And we unveiled them today to remind you. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as glass. Remind us of what, Admiral? Kane's gaze swept the room, meeting the eyes of every species, his voice ringing like a final judgment. That the day humanity wages war in earnest is the day the galaxy ends. The words hung in the chamber like a blade suspended over every throat. No one spoke. No one breathed. Even the Krell warlords sat still, their tendrils curling inward. Then Kane turned. Without another word, he and his officers walked from the chamber. Their footsteps echoed against the alloy floor, fading into silence. They did not stay to argue. They did not linger to threaten. They simply left. The humans' relic fleet departed Avarice soon after. 8 battered ships vanished into the void, returning to their quiet corner of the galaxy. No escorts. No boasts. No promises of alliance or revenge. But their absence was louder than their presence had been. In the weeks that followed, empires shifted uneasily. Krell ships prowled their borders more cautiously. Juran admirals drilled their crews with nervous urgency. Even the proud Zerathai delayed their expansion campaigns, whispering of human vengeance like children fearing shadows. Trade routes bent away from human space. Scouts gave it wide berth. Fear seeped into every council chamber, every war room. And through it all, humanity remained silent. On the observation deck of the USS Saratoga, Captain Sarah Whitaker stood alone, watching the stars slide by. The relic fleet moved steadily through the dark, engines humming like ancient heartbeats. Admiral Kane joined her, his hands folded behind his back. For a long moment, they said nothing. The void stretched before them, endless and unbroken. Finally, Whitaker spoke. "They'll never forget what they saw." "They weren't meant to," Kane replied. She glanced at him, her brow furrowed. "Do you think they'll come for us? Out of fear?" "Fear cuts 2 ways," Kane said quietly. "It can drive them to strike. Or it can chain them where they stand. Either way, the lesson is the same." Whitaker turned back to the stars. "And if they ever force our hand again?" Kane's voice was calm, resolute. "Then they'll learn what we keep hidden." The Saratoga sailed on, her scarred hull catching the faint light of distant suns. A relic, yes, but more than that. A warning drifting through the void. And across the galaxy, in chambers and palaces and warships alike, one truth echoed louder than fear itself. The day humans unveiled their obsolete fleet was the day the galaxy remembered what war truly meant. And the day they were forced to unleash what was not obsolete would be the day the galaxy ended.